Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us to this live TGS Town Hall, which we're calling today AMA, Ask Me Anything. Now, last time we called it a fireplace chat, and some of you sent me an email 2 months down the road and said, hey, do you know that the White House has copied our idea? They're now calling it a fireside hangout. So today, we are going to go on the coattails of an already well-established acronym, AMA. It is a common chat or general discussion forum thread where posters, users are encouraged to ask questions, usually relating to some aspect of their life, such as their careers. Now, in the early 1990s, AOL had an internet site such like that, and they also called it AMA, and users were encouraged to interact with each other and ask questions. Probably the most well-known site today for AMA is Reddit. Reddit is a social news website, and they have about 2.5 million subscribers with about 150 celebrity AMA threads. So I invite you today to join our thread. Send us questions. I've got my trusty iPad here, and send us comments, or you can send us questions as follow-ups on questions we've already answered, and send them to hblythe@imf.org. As we speak, you should see it at the bottom of your screens where you can send your questions through to. So without much ado, let me introduce our panel today. Thank you, Frank, TGS Director, our CIO, Susan, and Facilities Management, Scott. Why don't we start off with you, Frank? What's on top of your mind today as we sit here while we wait for our questions to come through?
Well, Helen, thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, although it's a bit something to get used to. What's on top of my mind? I think we've just completed the first phase of our asbestos opt-out, and people are starting to preparing to move. It's been an incredible effort, and the team has really stepped up to this in a very short amount of time. It's also the beginning of some of the asbestos removal that we're going to do. As staff has probably heard, we got pretty good feedback, really good feedback for the planning we had done earlier from the independent advisor or from the independent study that was done. And now we'll just have to go through that process, which is going to be a process, a lot about communication to staff. And again, it was a great effort, and including the moves that we're doing now, which I just mentioned earlier, from all kinds of parties. IT, I mean, IT that it doesn't seem too obvious that they're involved, but they were very involved, stepped up to it again in short-term notice, got the things done, got the things put in place. So thanks to everybody on the team and in TGS beyond that. That's the biggest thing, and then I think the other things that are on our mind is the employee engagement process that we've been to, what many staff have worked on and have participated and contributed, and that is very closely also connected to the staff survey about which we had a presentation 2 days ago, where a lot of staff attended actually and asked some questions.
Right, right. And how it relates to IT at this time, Susan?
The HQ1 renewal. There's been a lot of work and impact, as the people in IT know, from the HQ renewal opt-out process. So I really want to thank everybody for dealing with that and handling it well and working on the plans on how IT is going to support people during the whole HQ1 renovation.
And Scott, from your point of view, I would imagine that you've got things coming at you left, right, and centre for the last 6 to 8 weeks. How are your guys bearing up?
It's been a really tough 6 weeks. We obviously had a plan where we were going to start abatement, demolition and construction, and that has had to take a slightly different tack. The team, the HQ1 team specifically, have had a lot coming at them, and the way that they've gone about their business, both from a technical aspect but also from a general professionalism standpoint, has been phenomenal. And beyond that, the rest of the division have been heavily engaged in supporting all of that. So it's been a fantastic effort all round, and I really put my thanks and praise out to everybody that's been involved in that. And a couple of the other divisions that have been heavily engaged, because the colleagues in DG have been involved with other things relative to pop-up bistros and so on. The IT colleagues absolutely have been involved. So all in all, it's been a really, really challenging 6 weeks, and everybody has gone about their business in a highly, highly professional and engaged manner, and it's fantastic.
Thank you. Now, how do you see it going forwards? Because obviously this high concentration level of effort is going to be difficult to maintain.
Absolutely. I think we've gone through this work, and we are in reasonably good shape now. The first asbestos notification went out yesterday afternoon, and once we go through the first removal, which is scheduled for next Wednesday, we're into the long weekend, and I think it will give everybody an opportunity to relax, spend time with their families, and regroup. And we also have probably some clear water beyond us after that starts, and we can start to take stock of the situation and plan probably to be slightly more organised in the way that we're doing things.
Thank you. We have a question that's come through for Susan, and it says, what are the current IT issues that you are grappling with at the moment?
Okay, at this very moment,
At
as I
this very
just said
moment.
earlier, that right after this meeting, I'm going to have my APR discussion with Mr. Shinohara. So that's on the first thing I thought of. We're grappling, fortunately we finished the rollout of the laptops, and that was received extremely well. And we're just getting ready in the next couple of weeks to kick off the desktop replacements, and once those are done in a few months, everybody will have better, faster machines that perform well. We are also looking at some of the fixes that we need to do to DM, document management, another area we need to address, and also in FY14 kicking off a comprehensive project to look at how we do document management, working with SPR on some knowledge management initiatives, implementing the security projects that I'm not sure were approved the last time we talked at the fireside chat, but really getting those into a gear, addressing some of the security vulnerabilities.
Thank you.
And our business, we're working, taking a more forward look and developing a business IT strategy. Not so much of addressing the current problems and being fixated on those,
Right.
but developing a business technology strategy for where we're going in the future with technology.
And how are you developing this strategy? Is it going to be a bottoms-up approach, or what's your thought there?
It is not really a bottoms-up approach. It started out as a conversation with department heads and a couple of other, let's say, key members of their teams on on the capabilities of the fund, the basic capabilities of the fund, how technology could help support those capabilities. Then there's also a look at the underlying technology needed to support those technological initiatives. And then we are hopefully issuing a survey that will ask people to validate what we heard in those interviews.
Okay.
And in the end, it will give us the information to better target our activities and our investment towards those things within IT that add value, and look for efficiencies and cost effectiveness in the underlying technology platforms.
Thank you. And how do you see that aligning with the whole TGS business strategy? How do you find that working together?
I'm not sure I get
your
exactly what
business strategy
question
for
is.
IT. How does it align with the overall TGS strategy going forward?
Well, I would think whatever we're doing as the services that TGS provides, our services, major services of the fund, that same approach we're taking to, let's say, the economic tide capabilities we would take to supporting the TGS services. So both in how we address certain programs that are critical to TGS services, and then again, the underlying technology that supports that.
And I would add that the big thing that management, I think, has asked us over the last few months, more than probably over the last few years now, is to do anything that we can do in terms of enhancing staff productivity, enhancing their effectiveness, enhancing their ability to get their work done quickly, effectively, and enhancing the number of amenities or other things that we can provide to make their life easier, essentially, because there continues to be a high workload on the institution. Right. And so one of the examples is we have now sent to management for the first time a memo that outlines sort of what's coming down the road in terms of services that we're providing to staff, summarizing this. So we can have a look ahead, they can have a look ahead and understand what do they communicate, discuss at which point in time with staff, and what's the impact of these things.
And with these services, would you correspond with SLAs? Would you have that going forward as well with our services? So staff are quite aware of
Well, I
what they
think
can
many,
expect from
many,
us.
many of our services have clear SLAs. I would, certainly say that for the most important ones. Some may not yet, and maybe there needs to be some expansion of that. That's not necessarily an area I've heard a lot about, that we have to get quicker, and quicker, because most of these areas, as Jonathan said when he came, they were already platinum, and maybe we have to take them to, at that point we took some to gold because of cost issues as well, but maybe we have to take some to platinum as well, but back again. But right now there's certainly an emphasis on those services to the staff.
Talk about platinum. I see we have a new sign outside etched into our glass, Scott.
We do. We are absolutely delighted with the outcome of that. This is a really solid platform that we've built on over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. It's an initiative that Mary Beth started some time ago, and I've been able to steer and guide that. There's certain elements of what we do ourselves in terms of energy management and so on and so forth, but in terms of engagement with things like the recycling and the composting programme, we've put in place some tools, and staff at large have really grasped and run with that. So it's a fantastic message all in all for the institution to have achieved LEED Platinum in HQ2. I think it's one of maybe 5 or 6 in the DC metro area to have been reaccredited on that baseline, and it's just a fantastic story overall. The policies and the guidelines by which we are measured for LEED, it's also important to talk about that in the context of HQ1 as well, because whilst we have achieved it in HQ2, we didn't go for recertification in HQ1 for obvious reasons, but the guiding principles and the philosophies behind what we do on a day-by-day basis from an indoor air quality perspective, control of odours, VOCs and so on and so forth, as well as some of the energy management measures, will continue whilst we're going through the renovation. So all in all, it's just a fantastic message for the organisation to have achieved this.
Well done, well done. A question here. I noticed that the workforce planning objectives, I think this is for you, Frank, mentioned during the presentation a few moments ago, consider things like diversity and flexibility. But there was no mention of effectiveness, which should be a top priority. It's a long question. Is it possible that the downward trends we're seeing on customer and employee satisfaction are at least partially impacted by the effects of our limited term staffing approach?
Yeah, the background maybe to this, just to give maybe some people a background who are listening who may not have been at that meeting. And we had a briefing earlier for the limited term staff, and including the supervisors who lead limited term staff, to explain to them some of the policies, which can get fairly nitty-gritty and complicated. So the question, as I understand it, is does that affect basically, I think the staff survey results,
I think, yes,
or does it affect? Does it have a sort of a second-rate effect on our clients?
And the commitment from the staff, who may be a bit unsure about their term.
So let me start with the client survey. With the client survey, I think that this was the last client survey we did was last fall. I certainly cannot rule that out. On the other hand, we have had those policies and say 15 to 20% percentage of limited term TGS for quite a while now. So there may or may not be that connection. In terms of the commitment, I don't know to which degree this is driven by the limited term issue. It's hard for me to tell. I explained today that I do understand that limited term, these appointments, are something that reduce the plan ability for people of their lives, of their spouses, of their families. Susan and I are on a similar sort of appointment, rolling 3 years in perpetuity, or depending how long they want to work. The fund management wants to work with us. So I think we do understand the concerns, and I can certainly say that I've thought about it a lot. On the other hand, there are a number of business reasons and backgrounds that I've also shared today in more detail. I don't want to sort of focus too much on, take too much of the time now, that have us made the decision to have quite a number. And as I said, the range is between 15 and 20% in TGS.
So how does that compare to the rest of the fund, and how do you determine that this would be the right mix and analysis of the 20%, the 15 to 20%?
This is, compared to the rest of the fund, there are some departments that even have a little more. There are quite a few also that have a little less. But you see across the fund, across all departments, you see, certainly you've seen an increase over the last few years. If you look at some departments hire all their specialized career streams on a limited term, just like we do with most. So we're not an outlier in what we do.
Following on from your meeting with Mr. Shinohara that you're going to have shortly, and speaking about management, Frank, I have a fascinating question here, and that is, do department directors have the same APR rating quotas as the rest of the staff?
That's a good question.
As far as I know, yes. I think last year there was also a curve, but I'm not aware frankly, I'm not aware of the details of it.
I'll ask that question today.
You'll ask?
Yeah.
Susan will get back to us.
Although, just to clarify, we're not getting the results of our APRs today. That I think will only happen with the managing director later.
But we can ask that.
We can ask the question about the curve nonetheless. Yeah.
Scott, this is one for you. Is there any chance the 9th floor in this building can be reclaimed from the World Bank to accommodate some of the space crunch caused by HQ1 renovation issues, foreseen and unforeseen?
It's a good question, Helen. For some time, we've looked at that space, and the World Bank have a lease with us that expires in, I think it's 2017. And we embarked on a conversation with them as far back as 2011. And it became apparent to us that the group that was in that space were reluctant to move out because of the lease considerations. And that was when we explored alternatives outside. We have subsequently had further conversations with the bank, but in terms of them moving away earlier from their lease, the overall cost implications would probably be higher than it would be for us to actually lease external space. So we're in a position where that lease is going to run its natural course, and the process that we've gone through now is that we're taking the 4th floor at 1919 Pennsylvania Avenue to deal with some of the crunch that we anticipate with the renewal.
But I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that, because I know that many staff know about it, have heard about what we're currently discussing. And yesterday we had a discussion also with the division chiefs. So the overall issue is, and that has been an issue has been known for about 6 months now, is that in light of the growth of the institution overall, the original lease that we did, where now ICD and TGSDG moved to, would not be sufficient to accommodate the growth of the institution, and we would have a shortfall of about 225 swing spaces versus the original plan, because that's exactly how the institution has grown more. So now we have leased some additional space, which will not accommodate 225, but the equivalent of 100 to 120 offices, or professional offices. And we are now in the process of trying to figure out how do we address that difference. And part of that equation will be with TGS, and we have been discussing with various areas of TGS various scenarios and how we can contribute to the reduction of this crunch. We are obviously going to go back to management with it as well to see what else could be done beyond TGS. But our view is that we should and we can lead by example, because we have been saying the fund can work differently, the fund can use its space more efficiently. And so we have in language services, for example, we are in an early stage of a discussion around doubling up professional translators. So at the same time, while there would be 2 people in an office, the idea would be they would rarely be there together, but they would have a large amount potentially of their work being done from home, which in this type of work seems for which this type of work seems well suitable for. We are now discussing with two IT divisions, IC and IR, whether and to which degree they could use the space that we've recently leased in addition in 1919 in an effective manner, in a way that suits their business, the way they work, that suits the composition of their staff, which they have both of these divisions have a lot of vendors working there. So that's one of the options we're exploring further. And I have to say, they and other divisions, and we've recently discussed it with the front office in terms of the B levels as well, everybody has been very helpful, very open to find some new solutions. This doesn't mean that we only do these things in TGS, but as I mentioned, I think the idea is to take a sort of a
An
leadership
example,
and see how it works. And that obviously would include the front office of
Okay.
TGS as well.
So some of our staff might ask, and happy to lead by example, but what percentage of the moves would be primarily TGS versus the rest of the fund, do you envisage?
Of the moves.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't, TGS in general has been a little, percentage-wise, a little less affected than the rest of the fund, because most of us are in HQ2.
Right.
Now, some people from HQ1, TGS people, have moved already, and they're already in HQ2 now, during this so-called first sequence that lasts until about July, August next year. Then they will move back into their permanent space. The issue I mentioned around using space more efficiently is how many moves that will generate within HQ2 or from HQ2 to 1919. I don't think we have a very good answer or number yet, but it could affect about half of the people, maybe a little more, in one way or the other.
Okay. Thank you. We have a follow-up question to the limited term question, and that is, do you feel that limited term positions cause roadblocks to open-ended staff trying to apply for new positions?
Whenever a limited term position, and we explained that a little more today, that we expect supervisors to plan 6 to 12 months before a limited term has reached the limits, so to speak. We expect them to plan for the future. Whenever they do that and they post a new position, whenever they do that, they have to, that's the rule of the fund, post a new position, post a vacancy. Everybody among permanent staff or anybody can apply for that position, including the person who is currently in that limited term position. So spontaneously, it's hard for me to see why it would cause blocks. I think it would rather be an opportunity for mobility for staff that's already here, versus the people, the limited term people could then obviously apply for that position if there's another one vacated.
I can point to a couple of examples in my own division where that has happened, where people who have been on limited term positions have applied for other limited term positions, recognising that they are potentially starting in a new role and forgoing the position that they were in previously. But that has created opportunity for movement and other openings for others. So I see that in a slightly positive situation, certainly in my division. Whether that translates elsewhere, I can't comment. But
Anything you'd like to add, Susan?
No, it sounds like, I'm still getting to understand the system, but it sounds like no opportunity is lost because the vacancy is, to anybody, because the vacancy is advertised.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and it's determined what it will be by the person who fills it. I mean, if they were a limited term, it's, yeah.
We have a comment for Susan. I suspect it must be hard and frustrating to witness the current survey results fallout, oftentimes reflecting long-standing issues or feelings staff have been experiencing originating since the first waves of streamlining, restructuring in many areas of operations in 2007. So please bear with us.
Oh,
There's
okay,
a comment
thank
for
you.
you.
I will.
And then a question for Frank. One of the weakest items exposed in the staff survey was a perception of lack of trust. And this is a two-part question. How would you encourage our staff to ensure that this perception does not continue? I think the asbestos is one of these areas, in that they feel that the rest of the staff in the fund don't consider them professional enough, that they're not looking after their own people. That would be one thing. And the second is there seems to be a thought that the front office management, their trust level isn't as high as it could be. So if you could address those, what are your insights?
I mean, I would start by saying that it's by now something that's been fairly well established, that trust levels in institution, in leadership, in units, if you want, in units within a larger institution, are probably overall at an all-time low. There are many reasons for that probably you know much more about, and maybe you can elaborate on that general trend a little more than I can. That's one trend that we see. That's not supposed to say that we don't need to work as hard as we can to gain that trust, in some cases to regain that trust, and that is true for that is true for what happens in the HQ1 renewal process. And when you read the client survey, when you read our client survey comments, you will find a vast range of views on TGS, on TGS services. You will find a vast range even on an individual service. And it's our job to convince the ones that are on the low trust side that we are working as hard as we can, and that in most cases we deliver very decent results relative to compared to others in the same area. Mm-hmm. Now, with respect to the TGS and to TGS management and to the TGS front office, it's obviously something that I'm very concerned about. And I'm obviously disappointed about it as well. And it's nothing, I think, that can be fixed overnight. Mm-hmm. That's pretty clear. I encourage everybody who thinks I'm doing or saying things that take that trust away to give me feedback,
right,
in whichever way they may feel appropriate. I'm certainly trying to be as straightforward in the answers I give to these questions, to the answers I gave earlier to the limited term questions today. And we have situations where we have a conflict, where there's a business need, there are human resources, fund rules, there are issues of even-handedness in treating people in the same or fair way. So there are often multiple perspectives, and if we talk about fairness, for example, it's something that people have a quite different view. What constitutes fairness and what doesn't constitute fairness. So I encourage everybody to give me and us feedback. I'm sure the others feel the same way, because sometimes it's hard for us to understand where does a lack of trust come from.
Originate. Yeah? Do you have anything to add?
I would add to that. I mean, everybody, of course, it's disappointing because everybody, both ways. You want to feel that the people that you work with trust you, and you want to trust them. And I think and you want them to understand that you do trust them. And I think it's not always clear because of the communication what things even might trigger that sense that, oh, they don't trust me. And so I do think the conversation that we have in following up and addressing the issues that came out around trust in the survey, it's key to know how would we demonstrate that that trust really is there? What are those things that would make people believe that there is a trusting relationship?
Helen, can I just add one thing to that? It's in a slightly different vein, but you talked about the services that we provide and the manner that we go about our business. I think the asbestos exercise has been enlightening for me in many, many ways, because there was a huge amount of people petitioned against this in the first instance, and here we are at the end, where the independent peer review has come and audited, if you like, the work that's been done, and whilst there's maybe some things that we've had to adapt to through that process, the level of professionalism, the level of rigour by which we go about our business on a day-by-day basis is testimony to the fact that we've now got a significantly lower number of people who have decided that HQ1 isn't for them during the project. And that I can fully understand. But the rigour and the professionalism and the amount of effort that goes into making it right every day is something that staff should be really pleased and positive about their contribution
Right.
overall. And I think that, whilst it might not necessarily be a watershed, is something that we can point to and say, from what could have been a really poor situation in many respects, we can point to lots of positive outcomes, and we can maybe start to build on that for the future.
Do you think we could have more concrete plans going forward in showing the good work that our staff are accomplishing every single day?
Absolutely. The challenge, I suppose, is that we are very much in a service
And we're
sector,
expected to.
and there is probably a degree of expectation that everything should be just so. So we need to be very careful about how we communicate that, and we don't necessarily want to be seen to toot our own horn, if you like, but we need to take every possible opportunity to demonstrate the value that we provide to the functioning of the institution, not only here in headquarters, but also overseas as well, because there is a huge amount of work goes on in supporting the overseas operations, both from an office and residential perspective, the sourcing, the work that the security colleagues do, the work that procurement does.
For,
And,
like this international real estate, is this what you're talking about?
well, the international operations, the IT folks. So if we look at it from an end-to-end perspective, the value that we bring to the institution, perhaps behind the scenes, is phenomenal, and we should take every opportunity to do it in a really constructive manner.
Let me add something in terms of trust the other way around, because I think maybe there's also an element that people feel not trusted by us or by me. I mean, everybody who works with me knows that I can be fairly inquisitive and ask questions, but that doesn't mean that I trust or I don't trust the way people do their work, and the amount of dedication with which people do their work, and the amount of thinking and planning with which people do their work. Nonetheless, there's always sort of room for improvement. As some staff who may be listening or watching us, many of them have been part of one or two of these lean projects. And that's the idea. The idea is we can always get better. And a lot of, I think, what we are doing as leaders in TGS is to look at that aspect. And that in turn comes back to the trust that our clients have in us in the end of the day. Have they looked at everything? I mean, nobody scrutinizes, as I recently also told the department head colleagues, I've never worked in a place where every decision by the corporate service provider is as much scrutinized by the rest of by the clients and by the rest of the institution. And I mean, that is what it is, but we should see that as a positive challenge to get better and make sure we have these answers.
One of these questions here kind of leads right into that. As mentioned during the town hall, the fund needs to take a much more bottom-up approach to bring about positive change. TGS management was on the forefront and already used that approach in the Employee Engagement Initiative. So what are your thoughts in regards to the levels of engagement in TGS as per the staff survey? And they're sitting at 82% engaged, very strongly engaged. Tell us your thoughts about that.
I think I heard the number that it was close to 100 people who in one way or the other worked with us on trying to generate the ideas, trying to implement them, and trying to fill them with life immediately. One of the things that we did was we broadened the selection for the annual awards, right? And there were, I don't know, 10 people more in the room that beyond the senior staff or some of the senior staff who were deciding, debating, listening to all the presentations. So it was a big effort by staff, and I appreciate that effort, especially in light of the fact that I know everybody is working more than their 40 hours. And I think it was valuable. And I think the things we did, even though we don't seem to be seeing all of it or any of it maybe yet in terms of the staff survey for the TGS part of the staff survey or the TGS responses to the staff survey, I still think we did a lot of good things and a lot of things that were right. So I have no regrets in that respect. I hope that we can find out further what what's the gap between people's expectations of what is success in career development, for example, and what we've done so far.
And where do you see the employee engagement initiative going from here? And how would it connect with the survey results that we've just received? And would we form new working groups? Have you thought about that at this stage yet, or is it too early?
Well, we've been encouraged, as the people who were at the presentation 2 days ago, we've been encouraged not just by the people who conducted the survey, who obviously do this in many places and have a lot of background and knowledge about how these surveys work. We've been encouraged to focus. Okay? So I think we will focus on some small number of things, and the things we still need. We still need to. Yesterday, in the division chief meeting, so what is it that we need to do? We still need to determine that. With respect to the employee engagement, we're 80 to 90% implemented in terms of the roughly 20 things or 20 areas that we wanted to focus on. I expect that to wrap up towards the August-September timeframe, and in that timeframe, until then, we will also have thought about it more, discussed more with division chiefs to see where we're going to take this from here. I don't necessarily see us having 5 or 10 more working groups, but I certainly see us having some form of dialogue with staff to understand better what is the it and what is the gap.
Thank you, Frank. This one is for Susan. This is a long ongoing question. Are there any plans for restoring the internet connection to the World Bank network, including the directories and classifieds?
Okay, so the last detailed part, I'm assuming that the answer to the last part is going to be encompassed in what I say. And if you're sitting near Patrick Hinderdale, you can ask him because he knows all the details, and as well as others in IF. Yes, it should be coming live sometime mid-July. There's been an ongoing project with the World Bank with an outside entity to support, to provide the platform to bring that service back online for both the World Bank and for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Just as a reminder to everybody, we've got about 8 minutes left for questions, so please do send your questions through to us. This is from the IT area for Susan. Due to the demands made of many employees within TGS, some employees feel unofficial pressure from their managers to sacrifice their personal responsibilities, e.g. their personal lives, for the good of the fund. Given that the work-life balance is not only beneficial to an individual but also to the fund, why aren't work-life metrics of subordinates incorporated into a manager's APR in the form of a SMART objective?
I think overall in the accountability framework, we have something about work-life balance.
Yes.
But it might not go, it might not go down to the, at least for us, it might not go down to the level of detail where we could tell all the way down. And we could, like anything else that's in the accountability framework, use that as a vehicle to put in other people's specific objectives. But we do look at the overtime rates, and we're looking to them, like the people that have the most overtime and where they are, and we can see that in a lot of detail.
And
we discussed that.
Yes, we discussed that at the round table, for example.
Okay. And what about also perhaps those the snooze you lose if you haven't taken your 15 days of minimum usage of leave for the year?
Now,
do you look at those numbers as well?
You introduce, I don't know whether you still do it, but you certainly introduce...
The new office manager does, yes.
The office manager, Shirley, does it now.
Yes.
She sends out an email to all of us in sort of March time frame.
Right.
And the purpose of the email is to say, here are some potential snooze or lose people. And I would see my job, or I see my job with the snooze or lose people that are that I supervise directly, to talk to them about how we avoid that. And that's what I would hope happens across TGS. Now, the best thing, of course, is to plan your vacation now and to carry it out.
You know, I've been doing that.
And yes, well, hard to understand for others, the joke on this one, but I know what you're talking about, Helen. Yes, and I mean, that's what I would encourage everybody. And the August is a great time frame because there is a little less activity in August.
And on the work-life balance, if people feel that they're being unfairly constrained, they should have a conversation, sit down and have a conversation with their supervisors
And as
and
far as
work
I
that
know,
out with their supervisor.
this has actually been one of the areas where
That
we seem
we're
to be
Pretty
sort
strong,
of above
pretty
the line
strong.
a little bit.
Generally
Yeah.
speaking,
Yeah,
but we're
exactly.
probably the person who's submitting the question
Is
very
not, yeah, but
specific,
it
yes.
is something that legitimately they can address, they should address with their supervisors. If they feel they're gaining no traction at all, I think it's a conversation to have with the ASPM or the SPM, just in terms of advice, how do I go about this in the best way? Yeah, how do sounding out your arguments with somebody else, so you sort of get an idea of how does it come across, and maybe you can dig deeper on why there may be some resistance in some cases.
Thank you. This question comes from a contractual staff member who asks if you could please elaborate on the employee plan currently put in place for contractual staff, especially contractuals that have been in their position for longer than 3 years.
So contractuals, as many, most viewers probably know, there is a limit, a fund-imposed limit on the time that contractuals can work here, and that's 4 years. Technically, it's 4 years worth of work, because if somebody works part-time, they can actually stay 8 years, which I also learned a while ago. But let's say half-time, they could stay 8 years. Now, this is one key responsibility of every team leader, section chief, other supervisor, to keep an eye on the structure of the people, the structure of the appointments, I should say, in his or her area of work. And in addition to that, on the skills and the individuals, and to take care of the business need as much as the individuals, and to try to balance that. And we just said today that the expectation would be that 6 to 12 months before somebody hits sort of that 4-year mark, the supervisor needs to think ahead and think what's going to happen. Yeah? And I think we owe the people clarity as early as possible. This was one of the criticism we had 2-3 years ago around not informing the contractuals about the extension until sometime in April, when the extension would be in May. And we've addressed it, we've tried to address it to provide clarity for most everybody in February. And as far as I know, that we have gotten a little better at that. But if somebody hits this 4 years, I would expect the supervisors even earlier to provide that clarity, and to provide, if they think it's appropriate, other opportunities potentially.
Last 2 questions, and that is, let's see, whoever would like to answer this. Many people within TGS hold dual citizenship. Are these people included in diversity numbers, and if not, why?
Came from the, there was a board meeting this morning, and most directors were there as well, and that was a point of discussion as well. My understanding is that if somebody holds a US citizenship, this typically supersedes any other citizenship. The fund in the past has not been very formal in terms of counting or addressing dual citizenship. Fund is often not even aware of the fact that some people have dual citizenship, and it does not typically count towards the diversity number, at least in the current framework.
And lastly, given the lack of career advancement, what do you think TGS management could do differently in this regard? People say that they can't move anywhere. Yeah. How would you address this other than mobility? Because it is an ongoing issue.
It's certainly an ongoing issue. If I had an answer to that, I mean, we probably had a better staff survey, or better results in the staff survey, or if anybody had an answer to that. We've been trying to answer through a variety of measures, some of them in employee engagement, some of them before, in terms of mobility, in terms of a variety of measures, first and foremost to provide as much even-handedness for those few positions that we have where people can apply for. But I don't have a good answer to this core problem of a limited space.
And yourself, Susan?
I
Or
think that's the crux of the it. When you're
Yes.
talking career development, the it, what is it that people, given that there's limited opportunities
Right.
for actually promotion, let's say, what are the things that would be considered career development that are really meaningful to people in that environment? Is it more training? Is it more opportunities to do something interesting outside of what they do that broadens their skills and capabilities? What are those type of things? I think it's critical that we know what those are quickly so we can chart a course towards improving them.
We had a conversation in the division the other day, and it was all about maintaining relevance in the industry, and that might well be not necessarily training per se, but it's opening up opportunities to have articles published, to go and speak at industry events and so on and so forth. So it's giving enrichment to the job and keeping yourself relevant and actually learning at the same time. So it's something that we're exploring for sure.
Well, thank you very much to our panel members today. Really appreciate this conversation, and especially to all of our staff sitting behind their desktops. I would also say, especially to Sri from IE and Kurt from DF, celebrating their birthdays today. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody at the next live town hall. Bye, everyone.